The silence in my apartment is a physical thing. It presses in on my ears, heavy and suffocating. I'm not crying, I think I'm past that. I'm in the quiet, hollow space that comes after the hurricane where you just walk around numbly looking at the wreckage. Right now, I feel less like a grieving girlfriend and more like a medical examiner. I'm conducting an emotional autopsy. My eyes keep tracing the four faint squares indented in the living room carpet. That's where his desk was, the one he spent weeks assembling. There's a single lonely nail sticking out of the wall above the sofa. His favorite abstract print used to hang there, the one with the chaotic blue and gray swirls he said looked like my mind. And the smell, God, the smell is gone. He had this specific scent, a mix of his sandalwood cologne and just him. Now the air is just stale, neutral, it's the smell of nothing. I'm examining the corpse of our relationship, trying to pinpoint the exact cause of death. I know there were pre-existing conditions, small fractures I ignored. But there was a single, fatal wound. A wound that I inflicted. I just need to stare at it until I understand how I could have been so goddamn stupid. The chart for the deceased, our relationship, would note several pre-existing conditions. Looking back, the signs were all there, like hairline fractures in a bone, waiting for the right impact to shatter completely. When it was just us, we were good. We were more than good. We were a closed, perfect circuit. Dylan was my quiet place. I have a loud brain, a chaotic energy, and he was the calm eye of my personal hurricane. He had this way of listening, truly listening, that made you feel like you were the only person in the world. He worked as a data analyst for a municipal water authority, a job so steady and unassuming it was a perfect reflection of him. He found beauty in patterns and predictable outcomes, and he had, as he called it, a low social battery. Social anxiety, really. It was a deep, crippling thing he fought every day. With me, though, the battery was always full. The problem was I rarely let us be a closed circuit. I had to plug us into my world, into my friends. And my friends, led by my magnetic, terrifying best friend Carla, were the opposite of a quiet place. They were brilliant, successful, and operated on a specific brand of high-intellect cruelty. Their conversations were a verbal MMA fight. The sharper the barb, the more vicious the roast, the more points you scored. It was how they showed affection, how they established rank. I wasn't a natural, but I was a desperate student. I saw their sharp tongues not as a flaw, but as a sign of intelligence I wanted so badly to emulate. Dylan couldn't compete in that arena. He wouldn't. When I'd drag him to their gatherings, he would just shrink. His quiet nature, which I loved in private, became a glaring social liability in public. He'd sit there nursing a single beer for 2 hours, offering polite one-sentence answers until the verbal onslaught became too much and he'd retreat into the safety of his phone. And I, in my desperate need to prove I belonged, started using him as a shield, as a sacrifice. I'd turn his thoughtful silences into a punchline about him being awkward again. If he stumbled over a word, I'd laugh and say, "See, he gets so nervous." I told myself I was just breaking the ice, making his shyness relatable. But I was doing something much uglier. I was translating him for my friends, reframing his genuine anxiety as a quirky, harmless flaw for their amusement. I was apologizing for him with jokes. He actually told me, we were driving home from a brunch about 3 months ago and he was quieter than usual. I asked what was wrong. He kept his eyes on the road and said so softly I almost missed it, "It sometimes feels like you invalidate me in front of them. Like the parts of me that aren't loud are things you need to explain away." Invalidate, that was the word he used. It felt clinical, detached, I didn't understand it. I reached over and squeezed his hand. "Don't be silly," I'd said, my voice bright and dismissive. "I'm just helping you fit in, they love you." He didn't say anything else. He just gave a small, tired nod. The autopsy report would show that this was the moment the internal bleeding began. He had shown me his boundary, clear as day. And I had smiled, kissed him on the cheek, and stepped right over it. Now we arrive at the fatal wound, the moment of impact, the entry point of the bullet. It was at Carla's annual FCK winter party, a gathering I'd been looking forward to for weeks and Dylan had been dreading with a quiet, simmering terror. Her apartment was exactly as I'd hoped, packed, loud, and shimmering with the kind of performative coolness I craved. It was a terrarium for the people I wanted to be. Dylan was a wreck from the moment we walked in. I could feel the tension humming off him in waves. He was a man built for quiet libraries, not this cacophony of competing anecdotes. He tried, I'll give him that. He made a valiant, painful effort to engage with Carla's new boyfriend, a smug crypto bro named Pierce who spoke exclusively in memes and market caps. I watched Pierce ask Dylan what he did, and when Dylan replied, data analyst for the Municipal Water Authority, Pierce had smirked and said, sick. So you analyze wetness? Dylan just gave a tight, frozen smile, and the conversation died a swift, awkward death. I felt a hot flash of second-hand embarrassment, a traitorous little voice in my head wishing he could just be smoother. Later, we were all gathered in the living room, a loose circle of about 10 people, wine flowing freely. I was on my third glass, feeling warm, articulate, and dangerously confident. Carla, in her element as the ringmaster of this social circus, was holding court. She just finished a brutal, hilarious takedown of my new haircut, comparing it to a depressed mushroom that gave up on life. Everyone roared. The rules of the game dictated that I had to volley back, to prove I could take a hit and deliver one just as sharp. A sign of weakness, like being genuinely offended, was social death. My eyes scanned the room for ammunition, a witty observation, anything, and they landed on Dylan. He was standing awkwardly by the bookshelf, trying to look absorbed in the titles, a man desperately seeking refuge. He was my safe harbor, my quiet place. And that's when the ugliest, most treacherous part of my brain took over, deciding that the safest place was the one most ripe for pillaging. Oh, you think I'm invalidating? I announced, pitching my voice to carry over the music. The word hung in the air, an inside joke he and I shared, now twisted into a public spectacle. Jesus, you guys should see Dylan when he gets nervous. It's a full-on theatrical production. A few people chuckled, sensing the promise of blood in the water. Carla grinned, leaning forward. Oh, do tell. That was all the encouragement I needed. I stood up and moved to the center of the room, feeling the spotlight on me. Okay, so picture this, I began, and I launched into the performance. It wasn't just a description, it was a full-body impersonation, a cruel caricature drawn with loving detail. First, there are the hands. I mimicked the way his hands would flutter, unsure of where to land. They dive into his pockets like they're seeking shelter, then they fly out like they've been evicted. Then one hand starts rubbing the back of his neck, like he's trying to physically soothe the panic out of his own brain. I exaggerated the slight stammer that would creep into his voice when he felt cornered. I reenacted him trying to order a complicated coffee. He'll rehearse it in his head 10 times, but when he gets to the counter, it's like his brain and mouth get a divorce. He'll be like, "Can I get a large, a large oat milk, sorry, one of those lattes?" I made my voice high and shaky, my eyes wide with fake panic. The laughter started as a ripple and grew into a wave. People were howling. Carla was wiping tears from her eyes, slapping her knee. Pierce, the crypto bro, yelled, "Oh my god, V, that's brutal," and it was the highest form of compliment in this room. I felt a dizzying surge of power. I was one of them, I was funny, I was sharp, then I went for the kill. But here's the best part, I said, lowering my voice conspiratorially. His secret weapon, his therapist taught him this deep breathing exercise. I puffed out my cheeks, made a choked, whistling gasp, and held it until my face turned red before letting it out in a pathetic little sigh. I did it again. He does this little pufferfish thing to center himself, I narrated, as if he were a strange creature in a nature documentary. In the dizzying peak of my success, my eyes met Dylan's across the room, and the world stopped. There was no anger on his face, no hurt, not even sadness, there was just nothing. A complete and utter blankness. It wasn't a mask, it was a void. It was the look of a switch being flipped, a circuit being broken, and the person I knew was just gone, leaving only the shell. The laughter around me suddenly turned into a high-pitched, metallic shriek in my ears, the sound of grinding glass. The warmth of the wine evaporated, replaced by a shame so cold and so absolute it felt like ice water flooding my veins. In that one horrifying moment of clarity, I saw what I had done. This wasn't a roast. This was a vivisection. I hadn't just told a joke. I had taken the most vulnerable, fragile part of the man I loved, the part he trusted only with me, the secret anxieties he confessed in the dark, and I had offered it up to a room full of hyenas for a scrap of their approval. It was a public execution, and I was the one holding the axe. The drive home was a vacuum. The silence in the car was louder than the party had been, a roaring, crushing pressure. I kept glancing over at him, his face illuminated in brief flashes of green and red from the traffic lights. He just stared straight ahead, his hands gripping the steering wheel at 10 and 2, his posture perfectly rigid. He looked like a stranger driving me home after a terrible blind date. I tried to fill the void with words, the same way you'd throw blankets on a fire. "It was just a joke, Dill," I said, my voice sounding thin and pathetic even to my own ears. "You know what Carla's parties are like, it's just how we talk." No response. Not even a twitch. "I didn't mean it, you know I didn't mean it." Silence. When we got back to the apartment, the tension followed us through the door like a third person. I dropped my keys on the counter, the clatter echoing in the stillness. He walked past me straight into our bedroom. I heard the closet door slide open. I assumed he was just getting changed, that we'd have a fight, I'd cry, he'd eventually forgive me, and we'd fall asleep angry but together. That was the pattern. But then I heard a distinct, unfamiliar sound. The click of wheels on the hardwood floor. I walked to the bedroom doorway and saw it, the large, black suitcase. The one we used for vacations. He had it open on the bed and was methodically taking his folded shirts from the dresser and placing them inside. Not angry, not frantic, just efficient. Like he was packing for a business trip. "What are you doing?" The question came out as a whisper. He didn't look at me. He just moved to the closet and began taking his jackets off their hangers. "I'm leaving, Vanessa." The floor tilted beneath my feet. "Leaving? What do you mean leaving? For the night? Don't be so dramatic." He finally stopped. He turned to face me and his eyes were flat, the warmth I knew completely extinguished. "No, not for the night, I'm leaving." He said it with the same finality you'd used to say, "The sky is blue." It wasn't an argument. It was a statement of fact. The panic, cold and sharp, finally pierced through my drunken haze. "Dylan, stop, please. It was a stupid, stupid joke. I am so sorry." I was drunk. I was trying to be funny. I'm an idiot. The words tumbled out, clumsy and desperate. He zipped up the suitcase. The sound was like a gunshot. "You took the part of me that I hate the most," he said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "The part that I trusted you with, that I thought was safe with you, and you put it on a stage. You turned my panic attacks into a comedy routine for your cool friends. You used my pain to buy their laughter." He shook his head, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. "That's not a joke, Vanessa. That's a betrayal. It's the cruelest thing anyone has ever done to me." He walked past me, pulling the suitcase behind him. The little wheels made a hollow, rumbling sound that I will never forget. I grabbed my phone, my fingers fumbling as I tried to call him, to scream, to bargain. The call didn't even ring. Straight to voicemail, I tried to send a text, "Please don't do this." A single, brutal red exclamation mark appeared beside it, "Message not delivered." I checked WhatsApp. I checked Instagram. His profile picture was gone, replaced by the gray default silhouette. Our chat history was still there, but his name at the top was no longer a clickable link. He had blocked me everywhere instantly. Time of death, approximately 11 minutes after we got home. The cause was not a slow decline, it was a clean, swift, and total severance. There was no room for resuscitation. He had simply cut the cord. In the immediate aftermath, my first instinct was to seek refuge with the very people I had performed for, the audience. Surely they would understand. They were my friends. The next morning, after a night spent staring at the ceiling, I called Carla. My voice was a wreck, thick with a toxic cocktail of panic and self-pity. I recounted the events of the night before, carefully editing my performance to sound like a minor, drunken gaffe and framing Dylan's departure as a shocking, cold-hearted overreaction. "He just left," I sobbed into the phone. "He blocked me on everything, no discussion, who does that?" I was expecting a chorus of "he's crazy," or "what an asshole." I was expecting her to rally the troops, to validate my narrative of being the wronged party. Instead, there was a long, awkward pause on the other end of the line. "Well," Carla said finally, her voice stripped of its usual sharp-edged humor. It was flat, cautious. "And to be fair, V, it was pretty rough." I was stunned into silence. "What, it was a roast? You roasted my hair 5 minutes before that." "Yeah, I know," she said, and I could practically hear her shrugging. "But that's different. Roasting your haircut isn't the same as, acting out his anxiety attack." Another heavy pause. It got a little uncomfortable to watch, honestly. Uncomfortable. That was the word she used. Not funny, not hilarious. Uncomfortable. She, the queen of cruelty, was telling me I had crossed a line. The validation I was so desperate for wasn't coming. "Listen, V," she said, her tone shifting to one of polite dismissal. "I'm about to hop on a work call. This sounds really tough. We'll talk soon, okay?" She hung up before I could even reply. My attempts to connect with others in the group were met with the same lukewarm, evasive energy. I sent a frantic, rambling message to our group chat, a desperate plea for commiseration. The response was a smattering of heart react emojis and a single, "Oh no, so sorry to hear that," from someone I barely knew. No one offered to come over, no one called. My frantic texts to individual friends were met with hours of silence, followed by short, noncommittal replies like "that sucks" or "hope you're doing okay." The message was clear. They had enjoyed the show, but they wanted nothing to do with the cleanup. My brutal performance had made me, for a brief moment, the star of their cynical little stage. But my subsequent emotional collapse was messy, inconvenient, and definitely not entertaining. They had laughed at the joke, but now they were quietly distancing themselves from the joker. I was alone. I had treated Dylan's love like a disposable prop in my desperate audition to be part of their club. And now, having failed the audition and destroyed the prop, I realized the horrifying truths. There was no club, it was just a collection of lonely performers, and the show was over. I had traded something real and warm for a fleeting moment in a cold, empty spotlight. The autopsy is complete. The report is written in my head on a loop. Cause of death, a public execution orchestrated by me, applauded by an audience that has long since gone home. The immediate trauma was fatal, and so I'm back where I started, sitting on the floor of my silent apartment. The ghost in the machine, that's what I am now. My life has shrunk to the dimensions of my phone screen. I have his Instagram profile memorized, the grid of photos, the curve of his smile in his profile picture, the bio that just says he, him. It hasn't changed. He hasn't posted anything since we broke up. The last picture is still that one of us on a hike in the mountains, taken 3 months ago. I look disgustingly happy. He looks calm, content, safe. I refresh the page. Nothing. I close the app, count to 10, and open it again. Refresh, nothing. I do this maybe 50, maybe 100 times a day. It's a nervous tick, a prayer to a God I don't believe in. I tell myself I'm looking for a sign of life, but I know that's a lie. I'm looking for a sign of his new life, the one that doesn't include me, so I can pour salt in my own wound. Sometimes I branch out. I look at the profiles of his friends, his brother, his coworker who runs marathons. I scan their photos for a glimpse of him in the background. A stray arm, the back of his head, anything to prove he still exists in the physical world and not just as this digital ghost haunting me. Last night, I hit a new low. I created a fake account, a generic name, a stock photo of a sunset as the profile picture. I sent him a follow request. It's still pending. It will probably be pending forever. It just sits there, a monument to my own pathetic desperation. This is my life now. The medical examiner has finished her work and is now doomed to haunt the morgue. I endlessly circle the body, replaying the moment of death over and over. I see my own stupid, smiling face, high on laughter and approval. I see his face, empty of everything. And I refresh the page again and again, hoping for a sign, a clue, a new piece of evidence, knowing perfectly well that the verdict has already been delivered.